CrossCountry. Quite possibly the worst train operator in Britain, with it being infamous for short-forming, crowded trains, delays, and cancellations, ranking last in Transport Focus's 2024 Satisfaction Survey. It can't really be denied that in the 18 years, yes, 18 since Arriva took over, that CrossCountry's operations haven't been especially popular, with even government ministers criticising their performance. However, I do believe that there is a root cause to all of this, and that is what this video is all about. I believe that most of CrossCountry's current issues can all be traced back to one thing, and that is the company's rolling stock. To understand this, we have to travel back to 25 years ago. The CrossCountry rail franchise had been awarded to Virgin Rail Group in 1997, alongside the Intercity West Coast franchise, although, unlike the latter operator, which was largely successful during its over 20 years of operation, the CrossCountry operator was less fortunate. Virgin inherited an aging fleet of loco-hauled trains, formed of Class 47s and Mark II coaches, as well as a fleet of HSTs, both largely formed in rakes of 6 to 7 and sometimes 8 coaches. The operator was also seen as one of Britain's most unreliable, as seen in a BBC programme from 2002, when it was amongst 4 candidates to be chosen as the UK's worst rail operator, but that dishonour went to Arriva Trains Northern. Although, if you go back and watch that programme today, you will notice a lot of similarities with the CrossCountry we have today. Virgin immediately committed to replacing both fleets with new diesel-electric multiple units from Bombardier, dubbed the Voyager, made up of the 4-car Class 220 and the mostly 5-car Class 221, which included a tilting mechanism to operate on Virgin's windier routes north of Preston. Despite bringing fresh, new traction to the CrossCountry route, the new trains were far from perfect. Due to being designed to accommodate a tilting mechanism, the loading gauge of the trains was significantly smaller than the older rolling stock, giving a more cramped feeling for passengers. The multiple unit formation also resulted in a noisier experience for passengers due to there being one engine in each car instead of at either end. Coupled with limited space for bicycles, problems with seawater ingress on the Dawlish sea wall, as well as them being shorter than the Mark II rakes and HSTs, made the Voyagers a rather problematic upgrade. Virgin ultimately lost the CrossCountry franchise in 2007 to a bid placed by Arriva, creating the CrossCountry we know today. The new franchise would also include the inheritance of 2 former Central Trains routes, running from Cardiff to Nottingham and Birmingham to Stansted Airport, with them inheriting 29 Class 170s to operate these services. Part of Arriva's commitment was to acquire 10 HST sets to improve capacity, which was subsequently refurbished alongside the 170s. However, the Voyagers still retained their Virgin interiors. Now, Arriva's failings in operating the CrossCountry service in relation to capacity and punctuality, especially recently, have been well documented, but I want to focus especially on their rolling stock, as in recent times they have made some bizarre decisions. It all started in early 2023, when CrossCountry announced that they would be retiring their fleet of HSTs because apparently, and I quote, "The way people are now travelling for business and leisure requires fewer trains to deliver the number of seats customers need at present," which just seems flat out bizarre if you ask me, considering the reputation CrossCountry has. Now, granted, I do think that HSTs are way too old to be running at the moment, but I do think you should have replacement trains ready to fill the gap once the old trains are retired, which did not happen in this case. Either way, the last HST ran in September 2023, leaving a massive gap in capacity that is only just now starting to be filled, as CrossCountry are now receiving 12 extra Class 221s from Avanti, who replaced them with Class 805s and 807s. I will say, if you are happening to be riding on CrossCountry at any point, do hope that you get one of these units, as they are much nicer on the inside than the regular Voyagers, as unlike Ariva, Avanti did actually give them a light refresh once Virgin relinquished control. Now, of course, if you were an operator in the position that CrossCountry is in, with poor capacity and reliability, it would make sense to scrap everything and start anew. However, for some reason, they are not doing this. Last year, they announced a major refurbishment program for their existing fleet, with new seats and a rather polarising new livery. Now, granted, refurbishing these trains, especially with their 170s apparently having poor legroom and the Voyagers being basically untouched since construction, is a good thing, especially as they are one of the stinkiest trains I've ever used, and with the first few refurbished 170s now being in service, I must say they look very nice. However, this still doesn't solve the problem that the Voyagers are way too short for the services they operate. Case in point, CrossCountry is the only operator to provide a constant direct train service between Manchester and Birmingham, the UK's second and third largest cities respectively. On the day that I'm writing this script, there were several services running between these cities formed of only a single 220 with only 4 carriages. Of course, some were being operated by 221s with an extra carriage, until you realise that there really only are 4 proper carriages, as on a 221, one whole carriage is taken up by first class, which in my opinion on a cross-country train is just wasted space. Also, there was a 4-car 220 running from Plymouth to Edinburgh, which to me is absolutely insulting for a 9-hour journey. So how do we fix this? Well, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of CrossCountry's managing director and explain what I would do. I would demand a complete fleet transformation, similar to what Greater Anglia did a few years ago, and replace everything. To replace the Voyagers, I would go for a fleet of bi-mode Hitachi IET trains in both 5 and 9-car formations, as that has proven successful for several operators in the past. Now, granted, I've seen a lot of people uppity about how standardised these trains are, and it's almost certain I will get negative comments about them, but the reality is, at least to me, Hitachi is the only company proven capable of making a bi-mode intercity train for the British network. Of course, we will see some from CAF in the near future, but Hitachi has the proven track record in my opinion, and me personally, I don't mind the Class 80X trains. For the Turbostars, the most capable train to replace them in my opinion is the Stadler Flirt, with a similar design to the Class 755s and 756s, allowing them to operate from both diesel and electric power. Now, I've talked to some people that want to see the entire fleet replaced with Stadler Flirts, and while I do think that definitely has some precedent, for the longer journeys that cross-country do, sometimes exceeding 10 hours, it might not be the most ideal train for the job, considering London to Norwich, which is one of the longer Flirt routes, is just under 2 hours. However, you will notice that both trains I've chosen here are able to run from both diesel and electric power. This is because significant chunks of CrossCountry's network are electrified or proposed to be electrified in the near future, and in my opinion, running DMUs on routes like this is a bit of a waste and also leads to higher fuel usage and emissions. Therefore, by doing this, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We can resolve the capacity issues by running longer trains, and we can also contribute to lowering carbon emissions, just as Avanti, Grand Central, and EMR are doing by replacing their all-diesel trains that run on mostly electrified routes with bi-mode trains. So, there you go. That's my manifesto for fixing cross-country and how most of its issues can be related to its rolling stock. Is it perfect? No. But I do think it can do some work into resolving the massive overcrowding problem that CrossCountry has by running longer trains and taking advantage of the fact that so much of their network is either under wires or planned to be under wires in the near future. But for now, it seems that CrossCountry will continue to be operating with insufficient trains with poor capacity and punctuality, as it continues its reputation as Britain's worst train operator.